Namaste viewers, I am Rekha Rao, a researcher in ancient history and archaeology. I thank the organizers of the seminar on Devadasi and Jogati Parampare for inviting me to present a talk on the very interesting theme of Devadasi. I proceed to slide 1 now. The title of my talk is Role of Devadasis in the Evolution of Temple Architecture. Devadasi, the servant of deity, was a maiden married to a deity before puberty and was thus a human bride to the celestial god. I present slide 2 now for the agenda. The first point will be introduction. Then second point will be who are Devadasis? Representation of Devadasis in medieval temples. Historical reference of Devadasis in temple inscriptions. The training of Devadasis and their duties. Identification of Devadasi figure in a temple. And significance of dance and the compilation of Natyashastra. The 8th point will be exploring the evolution of temple architecture from Angabhoga to Rangabhoga temples. The dancing platform in front of the Garbhagriha. Then the Devadasis after the Mughal and British invasions. The 11th point will be conclusion and contributions of Devadasis. Now coming to an introduction about Devadasis. Devadasi, who were trained to be temple dancers, are represented in many Indian temples. She lived on the temple premises as a dedicated caretaker and performed the religious duties of singing and dancing to please the deity. It is interesting to know why Devadasis were in temples and how they were groomed. My presentation focuses on the vital role of Devadasis in influencing India's temple architecture. Also, it covers some contribution of Devadasis in preserving the traditional and classical art of dance and heralding the cultural elements of Bharat. Servants of the deity dedicated to the temple service were sometimes male members also. Some were also trained in playing percussion instruments and the wind instrument flute. Male artists are depicted to be playing instruments in the dance of Devadasi. Pictures from Hoysala temples of Karnataka and Konark temple of Odisha are chosen for a case study. The religious practice of dedicating a young girl to be the bride of a deity was prevalent in ancient India. While every deity in Hindu mythology is indeed associated with a concert, the offering of Devadasis as the bride of God was not meant to replace or supplant the role of God's consort. Instead, it was seen as a way of honoring and offering comfort to the deity in a unique and memorable way to God, and she was permitted to enter the Garbhagriha of the temple. The topics discussed in this talk are as follows. I go through every point with an illustration. Now coming to second point, understanding who are Devadasis. Devadasi was a human bride of the celestial and not marrying a human. She lived on the temple premises as a dedicated caretaker and performed the religious duties of singing and dancing to please the deity. Devaditi, Matangi, Kalavantini, Mahari, and Patra were the other terms for a Devadasi and her assistants. Since they were married to a deity, Devadasis were revered as Sumangalis who never suffered from widowhood. The Devadasi system was not a community or caste-based system. It was a religious practice and a cultural tradition associated with Hindu temples in India to honor a particular deity and to ensure blessings from the gods. The dedicated young girls were trained in various forms of classical dance, music, and other performing arts. The girls were known as Devadasis. The Devadasi system was a social practice that transcended caste boundaries and was prevalent in many parts of India. In some cases, it was to avoid a threat or abuse to the lives of young girls, and dedicating them to temple was a way to protect them. In other cases, it was a way for families to ensure the future welfare of their daughters and the temple provided a stable environment and access to education. According to temple worship rules or agamas, music and dance have been integral to worship sessions and a long-standing tradition in India. It is believed that the Devadasi system developed when Hindu temples began to employ women to perform dance and music as part of worship session and religious duties. Their performance in front of the deity was witnessed by royalty and the masses in the pillared hall of the temple. Over time, these women who rendered the service of dance to the deity in a temple came to be known as Devadasis, who brought blessings and prosperity to the land. Devadasis in Odisha were associated with auspiciousness and good luck to ward off evil luck. They were called Radha Dasis, symbolizing the highest degree of pure and selfless love towards Jagannatha, who was Lord Krishna himself. The Dasi, by her submission, exercises proximity with the deity, dealing directly with him. They were supposed to be charming women and were regular invitees to functions celebrated in the royal court, requiring her auspicious presence as a blessing. I move on to slide 3 now. A representation of Devadasis in medieval temples. There are two pictures. Picture 1 is from Belur Temple of Hoysala architecture of 11th to 13th century CE. And picture 2 is from Konarak Temple of Odisha of 13th century CE. In the temples of our medieval period, we can see the sculptures of Devadasis often showcasing their grace, beauty, and skill in performing the classical dance, following all techniques prescribed in Natyashastra. They are also playing an instrument. These sculptures, popularly called Shila Balika, meaning a stone doll, can be found in many ancient Hindu temples throughout India. To name some, Belur Chennakeshwar Temple, the Konarak Sun Temple in Odisha, Brihadeshwara Temple in Tanjavur, and the Khajuraho temples in Madhya Pradesh all have figures of Devadasis. The figures of dancers also adorn the pillars or wall decorations, adding aesthetic beauty to the temple. In architectural representations of temples, they were depicted as young dancers, as beautiful as Apsara figures, well adorned with ornaments, charming looks, and ideal physical proportions as Nitya Sundaris. In some temples, they were placed on a stone slab. In some, they were placed on a lotus base because they were the brides of gods and they were above the commoners in their dedication, knowledge, and insight into fine arts. The sculptures also serve as a reminder of the vital role of Devadasis in ancient Indian society. They were custodians of temple art and culture as they perfected all aspects of dance, the rhythm patterns, and melody in music, and they were good at singing also. They also had an in-depth knowledge of the Puranic and mythological episodes. These are depicted in sculptures by their dancing of pure dance type to the rhythm of varieties of percussion instruments. Their singing was defined as playing cymbals along with the melody instrument flute. They played the lead role in enacting a Puranic episode and were called Patra in the medieval period. Many inscriptions of Chalukya and Hoysala era mention the term Patra, and their remuneration in temple was high. I proceed to slide 4 now for the historical reference of Devadasis in temple inscriptions. Our ancient scriptures Vedas refer to music and dance in religious ceremonies and rituals. Vedas mention terms Apsaras and Gandharvas who were well versed in the art of dance and music. But there was no mention of the term Devadasi in Vedic text. Going through the historical proofs of the inscriptional statements, point number 1, the earliest reference to Devadasi is found in the Ramgarh Hill Cave inscription of Madhya Pradesh of 1st century AD. States about the name of a Devadasi, a dancing girl, by name Sutanuka. The practice of Devadasis existed mainly in the Shiva temple of Odisha during the Somavamshi, that is 9th to 12th century CE and Ganga periods. The Brahmeshwara Shiva temple inscription of Somavamshi's king Udyotakeshari mentions that his mother Kalavati erected the Shiva temple and dedicated beautiful dancing girls as Devadasis who were adorned with ornaments set in gems. The third point is the Shobhaneshwara Mahadeva temple, Niyali inscription of 12th century CE in Cuttack district, records that the king named Vaidyanatha offered to Shiva temple beautiful damsels like fairies of heaven who were fully adorned. The Bhanja Nagara plate of 9th century CE suggests that the existence of institution of Devadasi was prevalent in Odisha during the time of Bhanjas. 700 Darika or dancer families were attached to the temple during that period. During the Ganga period, particularly under the support of Anantavarma Chodaganga Deva, the system of Devadasi extended to Vaishnava temples. The Korni copper plate grant of Chodaganga mentions that Devadasis in Sri Kurmam temple offered the service of singing music, playing instruments, blowing the conch, and making garlands to the deity Narasimha. An entire village, Chudangashahi, was founded exclusively for the Devadasis of Puri Jagannatha temple. They were to perform, in addition to the singing and dancing, all the routine duties in the temple. They were looked upon with respect. Some of the Devadasis would also make grants for the maintenance of the temple. The Madhaveshwara temple inscription of the time of Chodaganga refers to a donation made by a Devadasi herself to God. We find sculptural representation of female dancers playing flute or drums in many temples like the Sun temple of Konarak, the Lingaraja temple, Rajarani temple, Mukteshwara and Brahmeshwara temples of Bhuvaneshwar. The Hoysala queen Shantala was a Patra before marrying King Vishnuvardhana. The Belur temple inscription describes Shantala Devi as Vichitra Nartana Pravartana Patra Shikhamaniyum Sangeeta Sangata Saraswatiyum. During the Chalukya and Hoysala eras, the lead temple dancer was called a Patra. I proceed to slide 5 now. It's about the training of Devadasis in a temple. There are 4 pictures. The first one depicts a Devadasi playing a stringed instrument. The second one is her dance with accompanying instrumentalist. The third picture shows us playing a percussion instrument. And the fourth figure shows us singing and playing the cymbals. To be a Devadasi of Lord, a young girl was betrothed to the Lord in the ritual which had all the characteristics of a marriage. Immediately after the ceremonies, the girl was put on training that began with dance lessons that continued for 6 or 7 years or even longer. Lessons in devotional songs and Puranas were imparted to the young girl initially by her adoptive mother and her spiritual guru in the presence of Lord. This was to connect the girl with the Lord. Her dress, except for the seva at the temple, was sober and devoid of worldly interest or luxuries. Later, she was well trained in dance and studied the intricacies of rhythm patterns and abhinaya. Abhinaya is the expressive part of sentiments, the navarasas. They were also trained in singing music and playing many instruments. They were educated in Sanskrit and all Puranic episodes. Since they stayed in temples, got educated and trained in temples, their art recitals were devotional and the key attractions in temple activities. Devadasis were in 2 categories. One was called Patra, who danced inside the temple on the dancing platform of the Navaranga hall. The other type was who accompanied the deity in processions, sang and danced on the road. The former Patra was considered superior. A Devadasi enjoyed the highest status in the temple and had the privilege of receiving the prasada first. She was also privileged to be with the Lord in his private apartment before God went to sleep every night. Only a Devadasi who stayed faithful to the Lord until the end had the privilege of having her body after death covered with the same sari she received during her marriage with the Lord. The embers of fire for the cremation was brought from the temple for her pyre. Devadasi was called Mahari, meaning Mahanari, in the temples of Odisha. 36 seva were offered to the Lord in the rituals performed by Maharis. Devadasis was the only woman allowed to serve Lord Jagannatha in the Garbhagriha. Many historians assert that this is the only Vishnu temple in the country where women could perform specific rituals other than dancing and singing. Along with music, the Mahari dance form got introduced in the temple before Lord Jagannatha retired to bed at night, where the Devadasis dance for the deity's satisfaction. The prestigious position of the main Devadasi in the temples was not hierarchical. Only talented young and beautiful girls were chosen locally or outside and trained in dance. Patra Devadasi didn't need to be in service permanently, but had the freedom to stay as long as she willed. The co-artists who gave the instrumental support to Devadasi's dance were Maddalikara, who played percussion instruments, Vamshiga, who played on flute, Nati, who was a co-dancer, Gayaka, a male singer, and Savagani, who played cymbals. All these instrumentalists are always depicted as bar figures in the panels of temples where Devadasi's dance is depicted. I proceed to slide 6 now. It's about the identification of Devadasi figure in a temple. There are 4 figures in this slide. I explained it during my talk. Now, how to understand or identify a Devadasi in the temple sculptures? How are they different from Shalabanjikas or Apsaras or another group of well-adorned Divyanganas that look very similar in dress code? It is important to note that Divyanganas, Apsaras and Devadasis depicted as beautiful dancers were integral to Indian temple culture and architecture. In temples, Devadasis are depicted in Sringara Bhava, looking into a mirror as decorating themselves before performing in front of the deity. She is shown with co-artists and instrumentalists. Patras were also shown as playing an instrument, which is already discussed. Apsaras and Devadasis are distinct concepts that appear in all temples of India and should not be confused with each other. Apsaras are mythological concepts, celestial in nature, and are associated with dance, but also with pleasure and temptation. In Hindu mythology, Apsaras are believed to be wives of Gandharvas, the celestial musicians. They are seen as flying Gandharva couples, signifying their abode of the upper world. Devadasi, on the other hand, is a human representation dedicated to serving the deity in a particular temple, heralding the culture of arts and being considered to be the respected member of the society. Devadasis were trained from a young age only in music, dance, and other duties of temple rituals. Of course, not all Devadasis were trained dancers. Some were co-dancers, some were co-singers, and many were in temple duties of fanning, cleaning the temple, and flower decorations. Temple authorities sponsored their salaries according to their status, and donations were offered in ritual sessions. In ancient times, the Devadasis who engaged in jobs other than fine arts were called Sule, meaning a temple assistant. The terms are mentioned in inscriptions like Kambada Sule and Chamara Sule. It cannot be related to the meaning of the current day usage as a prostitute. Now, correlating the activities that are depicted in pictures, observe picture 1 for the Kambada Sule, who is in front of a pillar And since she is also holding a chamara in her right hand, she is chamarasule also. We can notice that her jewelry is less. It means she is a Devadasi who stood by the side of the pose and fanned the deity. Picture 2 is Alankara Sule, was also to make garlands for gods. She holds a garland in her hand that she has made for the gods. Picture 3 is a different thing. Many well-adorned beauties in temple also depict themes related to tantric perspectives. She represents a tantric topic of chakra positions, hinting at the position of the first and the last chakra with the chakra tool. The right hand above the head shows a ball in the hand, and the other ball is at mid-pelvic position. The ball that she holds has marks on it, and it is an acu ball, which is used in activating the marma points like the thumb tip. It is not Kanduka Kride, a lady playing with a ball, as nobody plays with a ball, balancing it between the pelvic region and the pillar. The fourth figure is a Shalabanjika. Shalabanjikas are also well adorned, but they are always holding the branch of a tree. The first two pictures are the lower category of Devadasis. The third and fourth pictures are not Devadasis. We have already seen the dancing Patra Devadasi pictures before. In ancient times, Devadasis were divided into 7 categories, with Datta, gifted; Pruta, a free-spirited woman; Bhrutya, that servant; Alankara, decoration and aesthetics; Gopika and Rudraganika, the protectors or defenders; and Vikrita, who was affected with passions. Such categories reveal the origin and status of Devadasis. I proceed to slide 7 now. It's for the significance of dance and the compilation of Natyashastra. There are 3 pictures in this slide. The first picture highlights the interpretative dance, the costume, accessories, and adornments used by a Patra is defined here. She is depicting an episode or a role. Here it is related to the dance of Bhairavi. The Madalekaras are giving rhythm support. The second picture shows a talent in handling Chitike Tala in right hand and a small damaru or budubudike like percussion instrument in her left hand. She exhibits her skill and capacity in playing 2 instruments while dancing, and Madalekaras are giving a louder rhythm support. She stands in the Mandalasthana dancing posture, where the distance between 2 feet is less than 1 span. The third picture highlights the beautiful costume of dancers holding some object like a lamp in one hand and a pot in the other hand and dancing. She stands in Vaishaka Sthana, where the distance between the feet is more than 3 spans. All these postures, ornaments, and dress codes are prescribed in Natyashastra, which the Devadasis meticulously followed. Now, analyzing what dance is in the basic sense. The art of dance was the most appreciated form of cultural activity because it was audiovisual art. Fundamentally, dance is an involuntary movement of body organs when the mind and intellect are one with sound vibrations, which could be rhythmic or melodious. The physical body participates and celebrates automatically with movements when the mind harmonizes with the musical vibrations. Even babies respond with body movements to music in their own way, which no one guides. Physical movement harmonizing with musical vibration is the fundamental activity called dance. Later, the movements were structured as a set of prescribed body movements in a stylized frame that were called fundamentals or adavos and karanas, which gave rise to classical dance. From a philosophical view, dance is an expression of joy. It is the sway and harmony of mind and body in response to the nature of melodious, rhythmic, or musical vibrations. It sets the performer and the onlooker into a movement of spirituality. Hence, the sacred art of dance and music became part of temple worship sessions. For this reason of promoting spirituality through cultural activities, Devadasis were trained only as dancers and singers. The two great treatises the temple architects followed were Natyashastra and Shilpashastra. Natyashastra was a compilation of the art of dance, dramatics, and music. Shilpashastra was on the rules of architecture, an umbrella term for numerous texts on temple art and architecture. They were the manuals and knowledge source for creating uniqueness of Indian temple architecture. Commentaries on Natyashastra were so elaborate during the medieval period that many kings who sponsored temple building activity, the Vishwakarma, the Sthapatis, who excelled in carving, were well versed in the intricacies of Natyashastra. The jewelry and hairstyles added grandeur of aesthetic value to temple architecture, which were also discussed in Natyashastra. Sculptors knew human anatomy, the pure dance movements, and interpretative dance as Navarasas. Natyashastra amalgamated with iconography and Shilpashastra. It was used as a sutra, a base or foundation on which the sculptures of religious, mythological, cultural, social, and philosophical aspects manifested. Stone was used as a permanent medium to express the thought process, be it in the fine arts field or philosophy. The graceful dance postures became the inspiration for sculptors who were successful in carving the best dance sculptures in the temples of India. The sculptors tried to capture and freeze in a stone medium the very delightful postures of the heritage art performed and the instruments played. Instruments played by Devadasis in temples. The sculptors were inspired to carve the best dancing Devadasis figures in temples because Devadasis probably supported this work by being the models while sketching the dance postures. Through the combined effort of these two, we now see the style of ancient classical art of India and various types of instruments that were in vogue in the medieval period. Understanding now why live performances of dance and music was adopted in temple rituals. Dance has come to you simply because it creates beauty, grace, enthusiasm, and attraction. Sage Bharata, the compiler of Natyashastra, says there is no specific need for occasion dance. Dance is naturally loved almost by all people. It is eulogized as an auspicious and a source of amusement on the occasions like general festivity, attainment of prosperity, marriage, childbirth, etc. Dance adds grace, attraction, and enthusiasm to an event, making it more interesting. Dancer's oneness with music and rhythm becomes a joy sought when the theme and her spirit harmonize. The joy experienced by the artist becomes contagious, making the viewers also experience the happy moments, and they respond to the music in their own way, forgetting the mundane or bothering problems of life. Dance was thus an activity to enhance the enthusiasm for social events and part of big celebrations like birth of a royal heir, the coronation of a king, or a domestic ritual like marriage or childbirth, etc. The inclusion of dancers in temple architecture increased the scope for sculptors. The curves of the physical body, fully adorned, were the primary form they used to depict the dancing sculptures. To quote the words of Dr. S. R. Rao, Karnataka has a long tradition of royal patronage for art and literature and shared the common heritage of monumental culture of the Indian subcontinent. According to Kavya Mimamsa of Rajashekara, the king was himself expected to be a poet and an artist, not for parading his intellect or aesthetic qualities, but for promoting the literary equipment and artistic skill of his subjects, preserving and enriching the monumental culture of the kingdom. I proceed to slide 8 now. It's exploring the evolution of temple architecture from the Angabhoga to Rangabhoga temples. As per Hindu beliefs and inscriptional evidence, God is live and is to be revered with different rituals and offerings. The earliest temples of India were of Angabhoga type. Please observe the top picture, which evolved gradually into Rangabhoga type. Observe the bottom picture. Angabhoga temple gave a service rendered to the main deity, which included bathing, change of cloth, change of sacred thread, application of sandal paste, lighting oil lamps, and offering food as a token of respect. Adoration was paid to the deity embodied in an image or an icon. These services, which comforted the deity's body, were performed in privacy like daily worship rituals according to Agama text. These temples were not very large and ornate. The Rangabhoga temple, which included, in addition to daily worship rituals, the offering of Gita and Vadya through music, dance, and recitation of Puranic episodes, was meant to please God. The music and dance as part of worship were open to public in temples. The devotees who promoted Rangabhoga temples belonged to the promoters of fine arts. Success was achieved when Rangabhoga services were introduced in temples. After that, dance and music became integral to daily worship. Good dancers met the expectations by drawing a huge crowd. A good-looking young dancer with all her attributes and talent had always been sought after by the audience, who were attracted to temples to listen to music or see a performance even before they entered them. Temples thus promoted cultural activities too. I proceed to slide 9 now. It's about the dancing platform in front of Garbhagriha. Where did this Devadasis perform in a temple? Temples that offered Rangabhoga service had to be large enough with a big circular dancing platform in the Navaranga pillared hall in front of the Garbhagriha. You can see the circular dancing platform in the picture. It was for Devadasis to give their recitals. The pillared hall was so large to accommodate the audience. The temple premises also had an attached residence called Sulegeri, where dancers, mentors called Sulevala, and the other artists who offered service to God could reside. It involved massive money, as these artists could not do other jobs for their livelihood. Cholukyan rulers believed that dance rendered by young and beautiful girls attracted many devotees, which probably helped maintain harmony in cultural and religious heritage. King Vikramaditya VI built the Mahadeva temple at Itagi in Karnataka and donated a modest place and money to take care of the dancers employed in the temple. This is mentioned in Epigraphia Indica, volume 30. In the temples of Odisha, the practice of dedicating dancing girls to the temple prevailed in India during the very early period. A separate structure known as Natamandir and Diola was added to the main temple in a stylized way. The assembly hall called Jagamohan was for the performance of music and dance by Devadasis. Later, the same reverence of pleasing the mind of God was extended to the king, as he represented God on earth as Naradevata. The worship rituals that were offered to God were also extended to kings. Dancers performed Puranic themes, a way for king to understand the Puranic episodes. Both king and the common public got educated in the religious history and mythological episodes through Devadasis recitals. I proceed to slide 10 now. It is Devadasis after the Mughal and British invasions. Please observe picture 1 now. Devadasis were expected to dance in the temple daily and during various religious rituals, along with orchestral music of percussionists, flute players, cymbals, and so on as part of this service. Now observe the bottom row, pictures 2 and 3. In the later period, after the Mughal and British invasions, Devadasis lost their support from temples and were supported by royal families. Their social status declined as they danced for the king or wealthy merchants and were forced into prostitution. They were sheltered as palace artists at royal courts over time. The music compositions also changed from eulogizing the deity to eulogizing the kings. The songs called padams had God as a hero. Later, the music compositions called javalis got popularized, where the king was eulogized and the songs were composed on love themes. The well-accomplished Devadasis, guardians of classical music and dance styles, were turned into courtesans and not associated with temple service any longer. Over time, the Devadasi system became corrupted, and the practice of offering young girls as brides of the deity was misused for the personal benefit of temple priests and other influential individuals. This led to exploitation, abuse, and other mistreatment of Devadasis. The practice was eventually outlawed in India in the mid-20th century, and their role in society changed significantly. Appreciating the learning and perseverance, they got recognized with an altered status in the post-independence period and were recognized as Asthana Vidushis. Now, observe the last two pictures of the bottom row. Many great legendary artists like Srimati Rukmini Devi Arundel, Bala Saraswati, Srimati M.S. Subbulakshmi, and Kishori Amankar, who belong to Devadasi families, put much effort into evolving the declining phase of classical dance and music into a stage art. They established prestigious institutions where, to this day, many artists are getting trained. The 20th century saw classical dance and music performed outside the temple premises and evolved into a stage recitals. I proceed to slide 11 now. It's a conclusion and contribution of Devadasis. It is important to note that Devadasi system is controversial and complex. Opinions on it vary wildly. While some saw it as a form of religious dedication, others viewed it as a form of exploitation and forced prostitution. The Devadasi's contributions to preserving the traditional and classical art, dance, the conventional embellishments, dress code, and social life are significant. Some facts all Indians remember regarding the role of Devadasis in heralding the cultural heritage of India can be summarized into the following points. Point number 1. For young girls not trained in dance and served in temples as artists, the various types of instruments which are obsolete now would not have come to our understanding. Second point is temples were also centers of cultural art. Devadasis played a crucial role in the propagation of Indian classical dance. Dance recitals were only in temple premises before. The donations by the queen and other dignitaries to the maintenance of artists are detailed in many temple inscriptions. Third point is, the glorious contribution of Devadasis was that they pursued the heritage art of dance and music and served in temples without getting into family life. Recognizing their dedicated services, their figures got depicted on temple walls in a permanent stone medium. Fourth point is, Devadasi's glorious life was one of the primary reasons for changes in Indian temple architecture. The temple plan underwent a shift, extending with a dancing platform and a large pillared hall for the art recitals. The outer walls of the temples were decorated extensively with exquisite dance postures, along with the figures of deities, giving a unique identity to Indian temples. Since Devadasis were skilled artists, the sculptors could carve figures playing the instruments in their hands. The inclusion of Devadasi figures enhanced the scope for artists and sculptors. People could understand and appreciate the classical art of our land with an enhanced patriotic spirit. Temple figures have been like a documentary on various musical instruments used in the medieval period. Literary explanations exist, but sculptures give a better visual impact and understanding of the musical instruments. Sixth point is because of Devadasis, temples became centers to propagate classical art. Religious episodes were enacted by them that educated commoners in understanding the mythologies. The flow of devotees to temples increased as they could enjoy art forms. The appreciation and income for temples also increased, which were devoted to various social reforms. The seventh and lastly, the dedicated service of Devadasis in Indian temples was complemented by making their representation in the temples of India. Though the Devadasi system got abolished in 20th century, their contributions for 20 centuries in heralding and stabilizing the heritage, cultural arts of India remains as permanent records in our temples. With this note, I end my talk. Thanks everybody for giving me your time. Thank you.